Well, welcome everybody to our final installation or installment of in our stroke series, celebrating building up to World Stroke Day, which is Saturday, October 29th. So thank you very much for joining us today. We're very excited. We have a full panel to share all their experiences and life lessons that they learned along their journey, both for the survivors, the care team, and the caregivers. So without further ado, I just want to go ahead and jump right in and introduce our amazing moderator. Those of you that have been attending the series have been seeing some of her wonderful skills. That is Dr. Jessica Richardson. Dr. Richardson is an associate professor and speech language pathologist with the Department of Speech and Hearing Sciences at the University of New Mexico. She is the outreach director for UNM Center for Brain Recovery and Repair, and a member of our very own Chronic Disease Prevention Council Heart Disease and Stroke Work Group that has worked very hard to bring this to you. So with no further ado, Jessica, please join us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm kind of sad to have this month over. It's been busy for us to all fit it into our lunch hours, but it's been very rewarding. And I'm excited about the reach that we've had with the meetings, and then that we'll continue to have with the recordings of the meetings. So we are going to just dive right in. We've got a lot to pack into this hour. We did go back and forth about whether or not we should do it for longer this time, but for lots of folks' scheduling reasons, we still need to stick to the hour. So mainly, I'm one of those back-to-back meetings today. So we're going to start off with Laura Halton. She is a nationally certified teacher here in Albuquerque and an educational diagnostician. And she's also the care partner of a stroke survivor. So I'd like you to give me a warm virtual welcome. You can clap hands in the bottom or raise them here or clap and make noise to Laura, because we're going to have some interview questions for Laura. So welcome, Laura. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Well, my name is Laura, and thank you for the nice introduction, Jessica. My husband had 2 strokes in 2016 when he was 47 years old. He had 1 stroke where they had to go in and remove the blood clot. And then 6 days later, he had another stroke, which pretty much incapacitated him. He was paralyzed on the right side and couldn't speak, really lost the ability to read and had great difficulty communicating. We had 2 children in college at that time and 1 child still in high school. So things were pretty difficult and touch and go for quite some time.
And that was, it seems like a long ago, I'm sure, but it also seems like yesterday, I'm sure, because it really wasn't that long ago. You mentioned some of those challenges. Can you talk about some of the most challenging deficits that you guys experienced or that you still experience today with him?
Sure. I think the deficits change. You know, if you had asked me yesterday, I might say something different than I say today, or even 2 years ago. But at that time, I think one of our biggest challenges was financial. Eric was the main breadwinner. He was a civil engineer and he can no longer work. He is disabled. And I was a teacher at that time. And like I had said, we had 2 children in college. So in our hospital bills, I think we ended up paying about $12,000 out of pocket. We were very fortunate to have good health insurance. I think the financial piece was very difficult, learning to navigate the medical system, knowing where to ask for help, and a challenge that I'd like to talk a little bit about too is I was worried my husband would die in bed next to me. So I was afraid to go to sleep at night. His body was often cold to the touch. So I think that constant worry about my husband possibly not surviving the night, or just the unknown. I think that maybe encompasses a lot of challenges that we had.
Yeah, we're doing some research here too, looking at changes in sleep, changes in strain, things like that, and not just for the survivor, but also for the care partner, because we definitely need to know more about the effects of that, and how to intervene and how to help. Before the stroke, even in your professional role, you probably had some knowledge, but how much did you know about stroke, and how much were you prepared that this could actually be a real thing that could happen in your life while you guys were in your mid to late 40s?
What I knew about strokes was that it was debilitating and usually happened to an elderly population. And I didn't consider us to be elderly at 40. I didn't really know much more than that. I didn't associate it with people who were active or unactive, healthy or non-healthy. I really associated it with the elderly population. And that was really the extent of my knowledge of a stroke.
Mm-hmm. Now, Eric has, you mentioned his communication issues. He does have something called aphasia. It's fairly mild at this point. Well, mild in terms of how we test it, not necessarily
For
in
you?
terms of, I know, I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm just kidding.
Not in terms of the impact. And he also has apraxia of speech. How much did you know about that before all of this happened?
I knew a little bit about aphasia and apraxia because when I was a teacher in kindergarten, I had a student who had been diagnosed with aphasia and apraxia. So I knew what a parent might know about aphasia and apraxia and how it relates to a young child. I think it was a little different learning about it with Eric because it certainly impacted our day-to-day lives. So I didn't have an extensive knowledge at all about that.
And I know that if you guys have described it before about, that invisible disability, because, he can walk around and go to town and he looks fine. But there's that underlying issue that people can't see that can come out and interrupt things. Is that an everyday occurrence?
Oh, yes. Eric definitely has an invisible disability. Like I have described it that way many times because he can drive. Eric can get up and get dressed. He would not be able to prepare a meal using a recipe card or something like that. But unless you were looking for it, you probably wouldn't know he had a stroke. The right side of his face does sag a little bit, and when he eats, he can't feel the food on his face. He does drag his right foot, and he doesn't swing his right arm when he walks. After his second stroke, I think I said he was paralyzed on the right side, so that when he's fatigued, like he's doing some work with Jessica and Honey right now, and when he comes home, he is totally wiped out. And he naps. It's kind of like having a toddler that you want to, wear out a little bit so he sleeps well through the night. But yeah, if you saw him and met him, you probably wouldn't know that he had a stroke. But his speech, it's definitely hard for him in loud, like in a restaurant or in a store, to convey his wants and needs. He has repetitive behaviors. He'll like kind of rub his eye, or he puts his fist to his lips when he's trying to think of a word or a phrase that he's trying to get across. And it has taken me many years not to fill in the blanks for him. I have to tell you that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've shared with Jessica and panels in the past is that Eric's aphasia affects him in kind of a curious way, because he says the opposite of what he means or what he sees. So if the light is on, he might tell you that it's off. If I ask him if he do you want to go with me to the store? He might say no, but he really means yes. So that's a very tricky part of our marriage. is to kind of figure out what he's really trying to say or what he really wants.
And it might be an invisible disability to the community, but definitely not to the family. So what is it like? Has it been like for you and your family, especially with, young and now, young adult children, to help a loved one recover from stroke?
Well,
I'm sorry, Laura.
I always get choked up at this part. You think, 6 years. I think that our children have become very resilient and compassionate people. And I think as a family, they support me in supporting their father. Like if I go out of town to visit family or friends, our son who is here, he's in the fire academy here for the Albuquerque Fire Department. He has to come on the weekends and check on Eric to make sure that he's okay. And, he's eating and he's, accessing the food in the refrigerator, and just to kind of have somebody around while I'm not there. I think this is straying a little bit off that subject, but as a family, we have found that FaceTime is a really important technology helper for our family, because of the aphasia. It's so hard for Eric to speak just on the telephone. But when we use FaceTime, he's able to see our faces and our gestures, and we can see him. And we're able to kind of figure out what he is trying to communicate. So as a family, how it's changed, our family unit, FaceTime is one way that it has changed our family unit. His texting is very limited. He can text, but it's very short and sweet, and he does use the same phrases over and over again, and lots of emojis. I think it's also changed our family dynamic in that I think we're closer as a family. And I really do. I think my children are very empathetic towards their father. Just a story on the aside, I don't know how much time I have, but when Eric had come home from rehab, he was probably 6 months out of rehab, and our youngest son, who is home and in high school, he loves Chinese food. He loves sushi rolls. So we got Chinese food, and he challenged Eric to eat with chopsticks and try to bring the food to his mouth, which he couldn't do, and it kind of became a joke, but it was very sweet. And I know I'm rambling, but our son, who is home, also had to shave his father's face because Eric couldn't work the razor to shave himself. So I hope in those two examples, you can see how compassionate his children are in working with him. Mm-hmm. And they're very patient when he's trying to communicate.
Yeah. We do need to switch over to someone else. I really appreciate this. I was wondering if you could maybe combine these or answer them. Two things. What do you wish you would have known about the stroke and aphasia and other things that you could share with others that might be helpful? And is there some message that you really feel, or call to action that you really feel that you want to just have spread through, the crowd here and also as we post it?
Sure. I think, the call to action for me living in Albuquerque, it would really be to have support groups for people who are still working and can't attend support groups during the day. I think that would really help caregivers who maybe have not retired or are working to support their family, and just to have that support available, not just during the day or during the morning, but maybe in the evenings. I think that would be kind of a call to arms. And regarding aphasia and what I wish I had known, I wish that I knew that it doesn't go away. Um, he'll never be who he was. And I wish we had better ways to communicate. Like I said, FaceTime works very well. But even when we're working in my job with children who have autism or severe communication delays, they have picture cards that they can use to show their feelings or what they want to eat, or if you go out to eat, the children can use picture cards to show what to make their wants and needs known. And if there were some picture cards, and there might be, and I'm not aware of them, but we're for adults, that people or caregivers whose partner has aphasia, that we could use those, we could teach our partners to use those cards before they develop more skills. I think that would really be helpful, just showing emotions or showing what they want to eat or where they want to go, just kind of like adult picture cards.
I'm glad that you bring that up. We definitely have little pocket notebooks that we have that have a lot of things in there. And I think that oftentimes it doesn't get introduced at the times that they are needed the most, or sometimes survivors are initially resistant to using something like that. And there has to be a process of reintroduction and education. And that's definitely something that communities, I think, worldwide could be better at doing. So thank you for both of those calls to action, really. Well, thank you, Laura. I know you have to get back to work. We appreciate your time during your lunch break, and we'll be in touch.
Great. Thank you all so much. And thanks for all the good work you're doing. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
All right, next up is Mr. Jack Smiley. He is a young man who is a stroke survivor, who is also an NCAA ice hockey player for Endicott College. So welcome, Jack. If you can turn on your video if you haven't already. I can't see you. There you are. And I'm going to pin Jack for you all, or spotlight Jack for everyone. Hi.
Thank you.
How are you doing
Thank
today?
you. I'm good. How is everyone else?
We're doing well. How far away are we? Are we 1 hour or 2 hours away from each other?
Time zone 2 hours. So
2
it's
hours.
2 p.m.
Okay. All right.
On the East Coast.
All right.
But thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me.
Yes. Why don't we start with having you share a little bit about your stroke story?
Yeah. So my stroke happened about 8 months ago, and I was actually on the ice when it happened. I suffered an ischemic stroke that was a result of a dissection in the artery that leads up to the brain, and that resulted in me being completely paralyzed on my right side. And I did suffer from a little bit of aphasia. I couldn't communicate very well at the very beginning, lost a lot of my talking skills and just everything else. It's been a journey to basically relearn everything in life, from walking to just everything you can think of.
I imagine that was quite unexpected for your teammates on the ice, especially because you guys are super young and stroke's not even on your mind.
Yeah, it was definitely an unexpected event. I was extremely lucky that we have trainers on staff for practice, so they sort of knew a little bit of what to do. They got me to the hospital right away, but I knew nothing, and my teammates, I don't really think knew much either, because my stroke happened immediately. I know that every stroke is different, and what I've learned through this entire process, I've become much more knowledgeable in all the facts of strokes, but every single stroke is different. And mine happened very, very quickly. I went from skating, doing practice perfectly fine, playing to my normal abilities, not feeling any types of symptoms at all, to just completely disoriented. I could barely make it to the bench. And when I sat down on the bench, it was pretty immediate that I was losing function in my right side, and I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't explain what I was feeling. So it was a
Mm.
little bit of a mess.
Well, you're really in the very beginning of your recovery story. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing to recover, what you're working on in rehab?
I am working on everything. For me, where my stroke was located, it was a lot of motor function that I was dealing with deficits. I lost my speech abilities because half of my throat muscle is shut down. Just everything on my right side completely shut down. And so in the beginning stages, obviously the first 3 months is the fastest typical recovery. And things started to come back a little bit. And then ever since then, it's just been about doing as much as I can physically in use of that right side to create new pathways, because the ones that were in place before are now gone. They won't ever come back. They're dead. And it's been trying to get my brain to create new ways of communicating with my muscles. So I've been doing speech therapy. I was actually discharged from speech therapy a couple months ago, thankfully. And now I am in OT and PT on a regular basis, and just stacking any free time I have with anything that I can do physically to retrain my
Mm.
brain.
So retraining your brain, then I'm sure you've spoken with a lot of your healthcare providers about neuroplasticity, and that sounds exactly what you're trying to do, is to create those new connections and new synapses. Yeah, and I see rewiring. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you wish you would have known before the stroke that you can share with others that might be helpful?
I wish I would have fully realized how different every stroke recovery journey is. It doesn't really matter what you see from someone else. You just have to be focused on your own journey, and that it's not completely linear. Like, you're not going to have this just up and up and up. There are days where I feel like I backpedaled, and in the beginning that was scary. It's like, oh, is it done? This is where I'm going to end up? But you just have to take every day one at a time, step by step, and hopefully that leads you to the right place.
I love that you have mentioned that a couple of times now, because I wanted to make sure we pointed it out with this talk, is that if you've met one survivor, you know one survivor story. And if you meet one caregiver or care partner, you know one caregiver or care partner story or journey. And there's definitely some shared themes sometimes, but it, just like the stroke, is so different. The experience is so different as well. What do you wish you would have known during rehab, or what are you learning now about rehab that you can share with others that you feel is important for them to know?
I think it just goes back to that last part I said. I think what really hit me the most, and what was really just in my mind at the very beginning, was that even if there are off days where you don't, like for me, when I get tired, or if I'm feeling a little just not myself, I don't get the best night's sleep. And there are many other factors that contribute to it, but things stop working for me as well on my right side. I've gained a lot back, but it's nowhere near perfect. And so I'm still in those moments. If I get tired, my speech will start slurring, my right hand and my leg won't work perfectly well. So those moments can be scary early on. And I just wish I probably knew that you can't let yourself think of that one day alone. It's all a progression. It's a journey that you just got to keep attacking day by day.
I think what you're also describing is the variability in recovery, and to just kind of be prepared for that, right? That you're going to have better days than others, you're going to have worse days than others. And like you're saying, to not let, especially those bad days, kind of define or slow down the rest of the journey afterwards.
Exactly.
You're in college. There's a lot of information out there for for TBI for return to work, less so about return to academics. There's hardly any information for stroke just because, again, the focus has been this is an old person's problem. What does this mean for you for return to academics, for return to sports, things like that?
Yes, I was in a lot of, or in my speech therapy sessions early on, it was half and half for me. It was learning how to talk again, but it was also a lot of the cognitive stuff. It was playing just intricate games to activate my brain, and the thinking levels involved with that, because of where my stroke was. I did suffer I was very lucky in that it wasn't extremely bad, but I had some minor cognitive deficits off the bat. And I'm very fortunate to not really be dealing as much with them. I do still deal with a lot of mental fatigue. My brain will get a lot tired, or a lot more tired quicker than it used to. So if I'm writing an essay, I am taking college courses again, not my full course load, but if I'm writing an essay or taking a quiz or have to read material, once in a while, I'll have to take breaks more than I used to. I used to be able to bang out a 10-page paper in one night, but that's just not possible anymore. So it's really been adjusting to my new way of attacking certain objectives, and I have to set aside more time. And there were cognitive tests that I was doing at the beginning to really show what I would need for the future, if I would need more time on quizzes, if I could do certain things.
Have you found some support networks for young people with stroke?
I have been given a lot of information to really reach out if I ever need it. I haven't been really in need though. Me personally, I just take it day by day. I focus on what I can control in the moment, and it is what it is. Like, I'm either going to get through it or I'm going to have to deal with certain things. So for me, it's been really focusing on what I can control in that moment every single day. And if I do need it, there has been a lot of my therapists are always giving me options. So I do have those, but I haven't really reached out.
Gotcha. I think we could all use a little bit of that strategy in our everyday life, right? One thing at a time, one foot in front of the other. Do you have some message of hope, of anything about the journey that you would wish to share with other young stroke survivors in the world?
Yeah, I think two things. One message that has really stuck with me through this entire journey is just that no matter how bad it seems, it could always be better, but it could also be worse. And there's always going to be someone that would do absolutely anything to be in your exact position, dealing with all the good in your life, but also dealing with all the bad that you're going through. So when you think about it like that, it's very hard for me to waste that day feeling sorry for myself. It always makes me want to use that opportunity to do something and do something productive and with a positive attitude.
I love that message. I think that's wonderful. Just making sure that you take that time to get perspective. And I see some hearts as well, in case you couldn't see them. Some folks posted some heart reactions. It sounds to me too that you're quite passionate about getting the message out about your stroke and your recovery story. Is that true? You're really wanting to kind of spread the word?
Yeah, I have never been a person that wants to have anything define them like this. I'd like to not ever think of myself as a victim. I am a survivor of a stroke, and I want to provide that message for people who, because it is tough. It's tough for me, even though I am that type of person that likes to just focus on what I can do in the moment. It's still tough. And for people who are not typically wired like that, I could see why it would be very beneficial to see something off the bat. So I've been posting and documenting a lot of my journey on social media, hoping that it just reaches someone that is going through it and not really in that unknown stage, that's going through that unknown stage of, I don't know where I'll be, and that can be scary. So hopefully it affects someone going through that and makes them see that where you are now is not where you're going to end up.
Well, is there a way that we can, or that folks here can find you on social media?
Yes, I am mostly posting all of my stuff on Instagram and TikTok, and my username, I will put it in the chat, but it's just my name, Jack Smiley, but the L in Smiley is a 1. So it's JACKSMI1EY.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Jack. And I hope you stick around and maybe weigh in some a little bit later. But thank you so much,
definitely
Jack,
will.
for sharing your experience.
Thank you very much for having me. I will definitely stick around.
Oh, great. All right, so we have 2 folks that we're going to interview together next. We've got Catherine Glenday, who is the owner and clinical director of Life Recreated. And she has a background that she'll tell you a little bit about in the healthcare professions. And Nellie Arteaga, who previously was an employee at UNMH Financial Services and has quite a few hats that she's wearing for this talk, and that is she is a stroke survivor. She is a family unpaid caregiver, and she's also a professional paid caregiver. So welcome, Nellie and Catherine. And I'd like to start by having either one of you start with just telling you a brief bit about your stroke story.
I will begin. My stroke story, I've had 3 strokes between February of 2019 and November of 2020. So it was 3 strokes within 18 months. And none of them were typical. The first one, I woke up, got up to get coffee, and I couldn't hold the coffee mug. And I almost fell probably 4 times just getting in the coffee. And I knew something neurological had happened, that it wasn't demanding urgent care. And I happened to be also a below the knee amputee, and I was having trouble walking. Normally I didn't have trouble walking. The second stroke was, I had a very stressful client. I'm a psychotherapist and a health educator, and I work with people with disabilities, chronic pain, chronic illness, TBIs, and postpartum issues here in Albuquerque. And I had a very stressful session with a client. It was about 1 month into COVID. So it was April 2019. And I felt my brain separate from my body because I was so trying to figure out how to respond to this person who was in intense fear about COVID. And it just progressed for the next several hours. I went out to try to get food with my best friend. And by the time we got home, I couldn't get out of the car. So we called 911. And over the next 4 hours, I gradually lost all ability to control the left side of my body. I lost my ability to partially talk for the same reason Jack did. The muscles on my left were paralyzed, and I was really terrified. I got good care at UNM. I knew as a younger woman that I was at risk of stroke because I have systemic lupus erythematosus and antiphospholipid syndrome, both of which predisposed me to cardiovascular risk. And unfortunately, I didn't get the kind of rehab I needed right away. So I used what I know about the brain and did a lot of guided imagery. I practiced doing yoga in my head because our brains can't always tell whether we're doing it in our head or whether we're doing it for reality. jump ahead to last August, I finally got the right care and physical therapy and rehab. And I'm making good progress. Nellie was with me at PT yesterday when I got on all fours for the first time.
Oh, wow. What an amazing day, and to have someone so close to you there. Catherine, you're gonna get me. I wore mascara today.
Oh, I knew that
I
too.
never wear mascara.
And then today I found out that a poem I wrote is in Health Affairs online now. And I've always been a writer. I've been a writer since I was in 3rd grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't compose anymore because I don't have full use of my left hand. I have a whole bunch more use, but I don't compose at 80 words a minute anymore.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful to have a poem I wrote since the stroke accepted for national publication.
Oh, wow. Could you share that with us, either through the network or somehow?
I can share the link.
Okay, that would be wonderful.
And
I'm gonna go ahead.
I was just gonna say I can share the link with you, but it's on the Health Affairs Journal,
Okay.
and it's forefront poetry.
Okay. I'm gonna give you a break just for a moment, and I'm gonna ask Nellie to tell us a little bit about her stroke story briefly.
Well, I had a stroke about 10 years ago. Luckily enough. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Mhm.
we can hear you.
Okay, so I was lucky enough to get to the hospital and had rehabilitation done at the house where they would come and show me, you know, to walk and stuff. That was really scary for me to that.
And I'm gonna, just for time, I'm gonna switch to Catherine to ask you another question. You told us a little bit about, you know, some deficits that you had and what you also kind of did for yourself until you got the right care. I'm wondering if you could make some statement from your unique perspective as a health professional and a stroke survivor that you feel is critical to share with this audience.
I think that slogans like FAST are really helpful for regular strokes. When a person knows that they have high risk for stroke, I think the moment you feel weird, you need to go to the ER. I also, previous to the strokes, had a heart attack, and I had heart attack symptoms for 72 hours. And before, I was talking to a friend and said, you know, this pain has moved to my thumb. And she said, call 911. I didn't. I drove myself to the heart hospital. So don't be like a healthcare professional. If you have high risk, get help immediately.
I appreciate you saying that. And I just added a video as well in the chat box that has expanded symptoms.
Okay.
So the FAST, but the BFAST, but also some things to look out for specifically in women that sometimes are a little different than how stroke presents itself in men. So I'm going to try Nellie in a minute, but what do you wish you would have known before the stroke that you can share with others?
I wish that I had really let into my head what high risk I was at. Which is funny because when I worked for the San Francisco Department of Public Health, I was a behavioral epidemiologist. I'm supposed to know patterns of disease in populations. And when it came to applying it to myself, I couldn't recognize it.
Got you. Got you. Nellie, are you there? Can I ask what you wish you would have known about the stroke, and we can hopefully try to hear you?
Okay. Well, I took care of my father. He had a stroke. And so I was kind of, you know, I knew kind of what was going to happen with him. It was just different. He was bedridden after his stroke. So it was kind of hard, you know, because I had just lost my mom and then I was taking care of my dad. When I had my stroke, it scared me, because I knew what my father had gone through. And so when I got to the hospital, I couldn't walk. I was trying to, you know, I was walking and my leg was dragging. And my husband at the time, he went and he got the nurse, and they took me in right away to the back and administered that, I forget what it's called, in the IV. And that helped me regain. I went into the ICU for the night, and they evaluated me and kept me there. And that was really scary for me.
Mhm.
But I'm now working with Catherine. She's been a very inspirational lady for me, I'd have to say, because she has come a long, long way. I've seen her progress when I first started with her. I've been with her for a little over 2 years now. And I've seen where we started and where we're at now. And it's amazing. It's amazing. And that brings me a lot of joy, you know, coming to work with Catherine every day, because I look at her and I'm like, you know what, there's people out there that can do it. You know, she's intelligent, she's a brilliant woman, and she's just a sweetheart, you know. But yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a journey for both of us, I think, you know, but I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from her. And patience is one thing that you have to have with the stroke victim, because they, you know, you tend to want to help them with everything.
Yeah.
In my case, I learned that I had to do it myself. And that's how I do with Catherine also. I wait till she asks me. I'm standing by there in case, but I don't ask unless she needs me. And I think that's gotten her far, because she's done a lot by herself now. I mean, she's able to get up, and you know, she's not fully on her feet right now, but I mean, she's getting there, you know. And what I seen the other day at physical therapy, I was really impressed. I was really
Yeah. It sounds like it was a big milestone for the both of
Oh,
you.
it was, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I love a couple of things that Jack mentioned before, and Laura, and that you've just touched on, is that recovery is a long journey. Unfortunately, what a lot of patients are still told is that where you are in a year is where you're going to be, or where you are in 2 years is where you're going to be. And that's simply not the truth.
No.
Yes, truly, recovery will slow down. It does slow down. You have this period of spontaneous recovery, and then you have, you know, a steeper curve of recovery, and it's going to slow down, but it's not going to stop. And I think that's a critical message that I'm kind of going to summarize based upon what all of you have said so far, is that, you know, this is a long journey, and to prepare for that long journey, and don't let anyone tell you that it stops at a certain time point. We need to transition to our last speakers, but I wanted to see if you guys had just like one brief message of hope, or whatever kind of lasting message you want to leave with us today. And Catherine, if you feel okay, do you want to go first?
Yes. So the incidence of depression and anxiety after stroke are sky high. I knew that, and as a mental health provider, I have worked with myself not to let myself get depressed. I'm less able to suppress anxiety. If you need help, get it. There are lots of people who can help you move through and realize that sometimes your thoughts could be straightened out a little bit. They're very empathic people. I work with other stroke survivors. I do continuing education to share what I know about disabilities with other therapists. And your mental health is what's going to get you through. As we say in the amputation support groups, it's a mental game.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And Nellie, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I have to say, yeah, depression and anxiety is a big part of it.
Mhm.
because you don't know where you're at, you know, and you see yourself trying to get better, and then your mind's playing games on you, and it's like you can't say what you want to say. You have the words that you want to say, but you can't say them. And that's kind of frustrating, and that gets you depressed and you know, anxious, because you want to say something and you can't, you know.
Yeah.
That's
And they're so intertwined, that depression,
yes.
anxiety, and I want to just note too that in our research with care partners and caregivers as well, you know, depression is not just for the stroke survivor. Depression and anxiety is a huge issue for care partners as well. And so, Nellie and Catherine, I want to thank you so much for sharing. I hope you'll stay on. And we're going to transition now to Dr. and Mrs. Behrens. Just a quick introduction. Dr. Behrens is a professor at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and has a background in health education, and is here in Albuquerque now. And he's here with his high school sweetheart, Charity, who has been his greatest supporter even before the stroke, and has had various positions at different universities as coordinators, specialists for accounting, things like that. So they're both here today to share a little bit about their story of stroke, their stroke story and their stroke recovery. So Dr. and Mrs. Behrens, welcome, and tell us a little bit about your beginning on this journey.
Well, I'll begin, and I think my journey, I mean, my description of the journey will be quite a bit different from Charity's, but I'll begin. So I had COVID in October of 20, and that's what caused my strokes in November of 20. And I was hospitalized for 5 months during that process, where I had a large hemorrhagic stroke and multiple ischemic strokes, as well as multiple seizures that were related to the COVID infection as well. And so my perspective is really quite different, because a lot of that time I was out of it. For the first 3 months I was hospitalized. I did not even know what was going on. So I think my perspective is quite a bit different than Charity's.
Yeah, I think ours was a little unusual. I think because it was during COVID, it was during, everything was shut down. You know, so when it happened, I wasn't able to see him or the kids. So for pretty much the 5 months, my boys weren't allowed to see him. I had to fight pretty hard to actually get in to see him. And I didn't know anything about strokes. Again, I think that, like Laura said, I think it, you know, just I'm associated with older people. And I think it was kind of helpful to not know, in a sense that I just took day by day and just kind of went with the journey. So, but yeah, it was a long journey, and it still is a journey. But that's kind of our story.
And I heard you did fight quite hard to be allowed on that floor. So kudos to you for just advocating all the way as far as you could go.
You know, I think I had help. I think one of the benefits of Tim working at the university is I had a plethora of people around me who knew things, especially rules and things of what was happening at the hospitals, that they would rally and say, "Did you know this?" And I'd say no. And, you know, I think that having these advocates around me that had knowledge helped. So I think it was a team effort. But yeah, when push comes to shove, you know, I will be there to advocate for Tim and our family. So yeah.
And you mentioned COVID and the difficulty receiving care. And though Catherine didn't mention it, that was part of the reason she had such a difficult time receiving care as well, because just of the many delays and everything, because the hospitals are just overwhelmed with the patients and the care that they have to provide because of COVID. So that has played a role in both of your stories. What challenges, Tim or Dr. Behrens, have you experienced after your stroke?
Well, they've been numerous, and I would say they started with the physical challenges, because part of my story is that I was quite debilitated in the hospital. I was blind, and I was blind, and then I regained some vision. So now it's pretty good, but for a while I was completely blind. I had no use of my left side whatsoever, so I had to learn how to walk again, how to use my left side. I still have some disability in my left arm. My hand, I can't really use very well, but certainly it's a day by day type of thing, which is very difficult for me because I'm not a day by day person. I really want to plan far ahead in the future. And so that's been quite a challenge for me.
That's interesting too. So some of Jack's advice might only take you so far because you're not the day-by-day guy, you're the long. And I think that probably has a lot to do with your academic training as well, because you have to have that long vision for manuscripts, for grants, for whatever. Like you have to be okay with the 2-year wait or whatever. All right. So
That is true, but I would like to probably just say that I've learned a lot from this talk today, just listening to my colleagues. And I think that Jack has a really good point that it is kind of day by day. And that's something I've learned over time that I've gotten better at.
oh, good. I love it. That's kind of the whole point of all of this, right? Of getting us all together and sharing these messages. So I'm glad it works. What are you currently working on in rehab?
Let's see.
What have you worked on?
Well, let's see, rehab right now. I mean, I'm pretty much done with rehab per se. I mean, I don't actively attend speech or OT or PT. I do things like cognitive exercises. And so I'm starting to do more work-based exercises. So research in different areas. And I've actually transitioned my research capacity. So I used to do exclusively health education. And now I'm kind of doing some rehabilitation type of exercise, type of activities through therapeutic recreation and those types of things, and kind of transitioning my work a little bit into the rehabilitation space. Whereas before it had been basically when you're healthy, but now it is really how we do that from a rehabilitation space.
Gotcha. So the stroke has really altered the trajectory of your research path.
Correct.
Okay. What I'd like to hear from both of you on this. What do you wish you would have known before the stroke that you could share with others? And Charity, we'll start with you.
So I think I was thinking about this, and I think that we have kids. They were, when he was in the hospital, they were in middle school. I think that we, as just general people per se, I think we plan for death. We never plan for disability. And I think that's a really key to, like we have wills, but do we have living wills? Do we have power of attorneys? Do we have all these things that in case something were to happen, do you have those in place? Because once it happens, it's so much more difficult. And I think that that's something I wish I would have planned for, insurance, disability. We didn't have any of that. So when he was out of work for 5 months, I don't work. And I was trying to plan, plus, deal with COVID and shut down. And I started homeschooling my kids. And so it was just very overwhelming. But I think if I would have had some of those in place, it would have helped, just knowing that the finances were there, and then disability and things like that. But I don't think we ever planned for that. We planned for death or just what we have now. And I don't think that people realize that there's so much in between that we really need to think about.
I don't know if you can see the chat, but you're basically getting the equivalent of some amens if you were in church, that yes, you're right, on point. And I hope to eventually get you and Laura together because she has lots of thoughts and experience too of, still raising a family.
Yeah, her story resonated with mine. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Tim, what do you wish you would have known that you could share?
I can't add anything that Charity didn't already say.
You guys are sweet. What do you wish, well, Tim, what about this? What do you wish you would have known about rehab that you can share?
What I wish I would have known is that you are your best advocate. And if you think that you need something, you need to let people know about that, because I mean, as well-intentioned as the rehab professionals are, sometimes they miss the point or they miss the boat a little bit. And that's not any deficit on their part. It's just the part that they don't know. And so you have to advocate for what you need.
All right. And
I would say to that too, is I think that, prior to stroke, I think Tim's confidence was just great. And I think after it lost, and I think that part of that, he started second guessing himself and started to just not advocate for himself and just kind of not being there, his own best advocate when rehab. I think there are times when you come home and you'd be frustrated and then you'd be kind of second guess himself. And I think he's learned that he knows himself. And I think he is the best advocate for himself. And I think that over time, I think that he's gotten much better. But I think at the beginning, he really second guessed himself on that.
And it sounds like he's had you as a very strong advocate as well. And I think what oftentimes folks with stroke experience, especially if they have communication disorders like aphasia, is that they have more difficulty advocating for themselves because they can't use those words that they need to. And then we also have so many stroke survivors who don't have the support networks they need, don't have the knowledge of healthcare navigation that they need to even know where to start to advocate for themselves. And so definitely some gaps in our community knowledge and community outreach that could be improved very much.
And, I think that here's another caregiver. I think that my focus was all on Tim. And I think that as a caregiver that sometimes we need advocates for us, because I think there's a lot of mental health issues, but I think there's a lot of just things that we go through that is overlooked. And I think that's an important part to it as well.
Thank you.
I second that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So I'd like for both of you, and we're going to go a little bit over. So thanks everyone for sticking around. And I'm going to start my office hours over here and tell them I'm going to be late. But could you share some message that you want of hope, if possible, or not, but some message with our community, both of you?
What I have told people and what I tell my coworkers is that every day the horizon gets a little bit brighter. And at the beginning, you really feel like you don't even know what's coming tomorrow. You're very scared. You have no idea. You can't think about the future. But as the more time goes on, the horizon gets broader and broader, and you start to see more opportunity. So just because it's not working today, does not mean it won't work tomorrow.
I love it. Thank you.
So I thought about this, and I think that it's funny because, I have talks with my kids on a daily basis. And one of the things that I was talking to my oldest about was, looking at the positive. And I think that this stroke life is hard. And I think that if you focus on the positive and what you're going to get, you're going to follow. So if you focus on the positive, it's in the future and where you see is going to be positive. And so just to really keep a positive look and start to really focus on the positive.
And maybe kind of as you've mentioned, and maybe as Catherine mentioned, to reach out when you're having a hard time, focusing on that positive.
Yeah.
And to try to find those.
Hard to see sometimes.
It is. But there is light, and it's not a train or a Darth Vader. There is real light on the horizon, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten just tons of amazing messages today. Is there anything that any of our guest speakers would like to close out with, or any one thing that I didn't ask you that you'd like to share? And if not, we'll close out. And I'm so grateful for all of you just sharing your time with us. It's so important for our community to raise awareness this way.
I just want to say I would like to connect with Dr. Behrens. I got my MPH from Houston, and I trained under Pat Mullen. So I also am starting to incorporate rehab, and I'm looking to build an organization here. And tears, crying, and laughter are all a part of emotional changes after stroke.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can definitely help you get connected. And thank you for pointing that out too, that need for connection. And we're happy to share. If you put your email in the chat, you can also receive links to the recordings for all of these. And we'll see you again next year, hopefully for something similar. And please make sure you do something for World Stroke Day to spread the word about stroke. And thank you all. Cheryl, do you have anything else to say?
I'm here. No, just amazing. Thank you to all for sharing your story. Jessica, thank you for moderating such a impactful conversation. And yes, we're here to make these connections and to thank you just for sharing everything. So it was wonderful. And yes, we'll be back next year. So thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for setting it up.
Yes, thank you for coming.